All right, folks, the time has come. Welcome to this special presentation by the Idaho Museum of Art and Geology. I see a lot of old friends here, Mike, for those who are not members. I'm Steve Cox, board president, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. You know, Pennsylvania's got Punxsutawney Phil, but Idaho has Snowman Run. Idaho's favorite snowman got started at the Colorado State University Watershed Science Program and had a long and distinguished career with the National Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, and actually was Idaho's first water supply specialist working with the NRCS Snow Survey Program. We all remember all those videos that run up on Forest Creek Summit, plunging along, tuning into the snow and telling us how our reservoirs would be in the coming summer. So Ron is here to tell us about our water future. Please give a warm Idaho welcome to Ron Abramovich.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'd rather have a cold welcome. And that's funny about Groundhog Day, because I always thought that every Western state should have their own Groundhog Day, and this one should be called Morley Nelson. And it's based on the amount of snow in the West, whether or not you actually need 6 more weeks of winter or not. And not rather than a groundhog back in Pennsylvania telling us what we need or not. So, but that's my own 2 cents about Groundhog Day. So thanks for making it here, and we got a lot to talk about because it's a really interesting year. It's kind of a fire and ice year. If you have some questions during the talk, feel free. We can answer a few of them. But I got a lot of slides here to keep you busy and to show you what's really happening about this 3-dimensional drought that I'm calling it. That we'll talk about how we got here as well, too. After we talk about the El Nino brewing for next year and maybe the year after or beyond that. What happened in 2025, I think I was here a year ago giving a talk as well, too. So we'll pick up where we left off then. And the climate teleconnections. When I talk about analog years, I just mean similar years to this year, that the conditions are setting up in the Pacific Ocean based on the sea surface temperature and the atmosphere above the ocean as well, too. I don't know if we don't have any maps of the Pacific Ocean here, but it's huge. If you look at a globe map of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii's in the middle, it's nothing but all water all the way around it. And we're so close to it here, being in North America as well, too. That's why it affects our weather so much, and it gives us a 6-month indicator as well, too. So then we'll talk about the 3D drought, current water supply conditions, weather outlook. Basically, what you see is what you get until the weather pattern changes around April 1st. Hopefully, it'll change for the colder and wetter. And then amazing final round on the spreadsheet I've been using for like 20-some years, too. So, but here's just a little review about El Niño and La Niña. So this year was, see if this pointer works.
I don't think it does, right? I can't use that.
Use this, okay. With my left hand. So here's the La Niña conditions in January of this year. The cooler ocean temperatures here, 2 to 3 degrees below normal Celsius. While the El Nino is a warming up of the Pacific Ocean over here back in 24, and looking like what we're going to have for next year as well, too, for 27, possibly 28 as well, too. And so the storms typically come in La Niña from the Pacific Northwest and La Niña from the desert Southwest. So they're kind of opposites here in the Western U.S. and across the whole U.S. But that doesn't always happen because there's a greater degree of climate variability is what we're seeing, basically. So if we go to, here's the current conditions on March 19th, and the colder temperatures that we saw on the previous slide kind of faded away, and now it's starting to warm up already. And here's a colder spot up in the south of Alaska, PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, we'll talk about a little bit as well, too. So, and this is why, let's talk about next year already before we talk about this year. And so this came out in September 2025, and it talks about El Nino brewing for this coming summer and next year as well, too. So here's La Niña conditions, the index, going from where we are to El Nino conditions up here. And La Niña fading away now in the springtime, and then El Nino developing chance of probability is up to 60%, but then it continues on for another year as well too. So they're doing a lot of work and research and studying this, so they must be feeling pretty confident it's going to happen as well too, to go this far out. Usually you don't see it till the springtime what's going to happen later on this summer. So the key part in the Pacific Ocean, what happens here is between July and November, and that's what correlates with the winter weather up here. So that's why it gives us that 6-month indicator. Here's one of my favorite graphs now, and it really shows you the strength of these El Nino years on the top and the La Nina years on the bottom. Here's 73, 74, and 72, 73. So these are the strong La Ninas. We just had one, 2016, and even 2 years ago, 2014. So now they're talking about popping back up to a strong, a super El Nino again as well too. What's that?
Another snow again?
Yes, or the year after. And is Bill Ondrejk here? I don't see Bill. No, he didn't make it? Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So Bill worked for IDWR when I got here, and he probably got tired of all my questions about what year was a good year, the first year of El Nino or second year. And so I made this graph I'll show you. So the year following a strong El Nino is typically pretty good. And that's what happened up here. So this is 2016, then the year following was 2017, and that was a snowmageddon. So you kind of have possibly 2 good years in a row, depending on how strong El Nino, not how strong it is, where the track is, and it pushes all the way up through Nevada into southern Idaho as well too on some of these strong El Nino years. So we'll have to wait till next year, I guess, or what happens. But let's go back to last year. So here's where we're on April 1st, a year ago, with all the storms coming in from the Klamath Basin basically. After they removed the dams there, they had a really good water supply in the rivers there, and they came right up to central Idaho, west central Idaho. And remember, Bogus Basin had a 100-inch party about a year ago, 100 inches of snow depth. They've only reached 100 inches of snow on the ground 8 times since 1942. So it was a good year last year. Here's the water supply forecast. Shades of blue are 150% or better. Then they fade to normal, green, and below normal in Montana and below in the southwest. So it's looking like a good snow year, just like the year after a strong El Nino happens. But then, so this is that chart that has the strong El Nino years and the year following, and shades of blue are above average stream flow for the Boise River. 2017 was 184% of normal stream flow. And the other ones were all near average or better, 89% for this one year. The colors of pinkish are more below normal. So a year ago, I was telling you the flow is going to be 130 to 115 to 117% of average with that good snowpack. But what happened on April 1st last year? It was April Fool's Day, but it also stopped raining and snowing for 3 months. And so we got very little spring precipitation. So instead of seeing these numbers, we actually saw these, and the runoff was barely 100% of average in this year following the strong El Nino. Some of them were 66, 69% of average in northern Idaho. So here's that spring precipitation. Even though we had a good snowpack, near record dry spring, the shades of red are record driest, equals much less than normal runoff, because you just add a little bit of rain to snowpack, you get better runoff. But we didn't get that rain last year at all for April, May, and June, 90 days. And here's just another map as well too, showing how dry it was in parts of Idaho. Kind of living in extremes, from one extreme to the other. The spigots on or spigots off is typically what we've been seeing for quite a while. I've been seeing that for quite a while too. So here's just a good example of the water supply forecast, because people really just want the answer, what's going to happen, but we don't give you one number. We give you a range of numbers, what's going to happen for the exceedance forecast. So there's a 90% chance a flow at the Wahoo River was going to be 210,000 acre-feet or more, and only at 10% was going to be 645. So in April 1, we're forecasting 380, which means 50% is going to be above or 50% below, and the actual flow was like 217 because of that dry spring and everything. So this just didn't happen in Hawaii, but it happened in other parts of Oregon as well too. I mean, this shows it here being about 50% below, 50% off of the percentage points is how dry it was. So other years when I used to work, if the precipitation in the spring was 75% of normal, you could expect the flows around here to 70% exceedance. And if spring precip was 125% of normal, it'd be up here on the wetter side. But I had never seen a record dry precip in the spring like last year. So it's kind of another lessons learned and what could happen, and it actually did happen. So that's why we put 5 exceedance forecast numbers on there, not just 1. Okay, then moving on to the summer precipitation. This is July through September. And it was kind of near normal, is white, green's above average, and yellow's a little bit below normal. So it helped put a damper in the fires because you get a little bit of precip all summer long. That really helps with the fires rather than extended dry spells. But it didn't help with the spring runoff because it was already melted and gone by then. Then we move into October, November. Precipitation is below average, white is near normal here in Idaho. And it's warm temperatures, and we're still starting to wait for snow. It's November, it's Thanksgiving. Ski areas may open, but they can't. So they can't even make snow, so it's so warm and everything. And so now we'll talk about how did we get here. So December 25th arrived, and we're still waiting for the snow. This was 2023 on Cat Creek Summit going to Fairfield, and this is February of this year. Whoops, that's supposed to be the same sign. So, but December 18th is when the weather pattern changed. And so that's when the moisture came in. And parts of the Big Lost Basin for this 2-week period, they were pushing 800% of normal precipitation. Plus the mountains are taller there, so most of that precip fell as snow rather than rain here at Bogus Basin. So that difference in elevation really made a difference on how much snow you got in early season or not. And here's a map of the temperatures as well too, showing how much above average they were, like pushing 10 degrees basically, 9 to 10 to 12 degrees above normal for that same 2-week period. Oh, so then, yeah, we went skiing at Anthony Lakes, December 28th. I met this seed crop grower from La Grande. I started talking about the snow drought and everything. I said, aren't you concerned about the snow drought? Because he gets his surface water from rivers, his irrigation water from rivers on the surface, basically, no groundwater. He goes, no, I'm not concerned. I said, why not? He goes, it snows every calving season. So I said, when's calving season? He said, February 14th. And he nailed it. So I got to find this guy again. So I started telling everybody it's going to snow February 14th. And that's when the pattern changed again. So this was a 2-week period here, and it came more across southern Idaho, or central Idaho here as well too. And then mid-March, just a week or two ago, the 13th to the 19th, here's a moisture band that came off from the Cascades of Washington, bringing rain, snow, feet of snow, and more rain. And it finally just ended up in the Cascades and Hawaii as well too. I saw one report, they got 40 to 60 inches of rain in Hawaii. So that's amazing. So this was a really long atmospheric river coming all the way across the northern parts of the west here, pushing what's at 200% of normal. But didn't really make it south of the Salmon River. Brundage got some snow as well too. And Bogus got some that really helped out. Yes?
When you say atmospheric river, what is that exactly?
Basically a wet band just like that coming across the ocean. They used to call them the Pineapple Express. And so it's abundant moisture coming in from Hawaii typically. And it looks like a river of moisture coming right in at us.
From clouds?
Yeah, clouds, water vapor in the atmosphere. Some people got pretty smart and everything. They started measuring the size of the atmosphere. Actually, they scale from 1 to 5 now, with 5 being the strongest. But at first, they were putting the size, the amount of moisture was in the size of the Mississippi River. So it was 10 Mississippi rivers is how much moisture there, or 15. And I said, well, this is the West. Why don't we use the Columbia River or something? So they're kind of similar. Yeah.
So does the atmospheric river have any, it seemed like this year that eastern part of the US, the western part got flipped. So when we were getting warm and nothing, they were getting wet and cold.
Right.
So is that part of the cause or?
Part of it, that was it was an active polar vortex as well too,
Right.
which is over the North Pole, and so it broke several times this year. And when it's active, it means the jet stream is more making wavy patterns. When it's more not as active, then it's going straight around the North Pole. So this year is active, making the big jet stream dips like that, and that's what nailed the east. There's a high pressure that built up off the coast of Washington here that diverted those storms north of us into the East Coast, basically, over and over. Yeah. Okay, now let's go on to, I still follow this one guy, Pete Parson, out of Oregon Department of Forestry, and he looks at the Pacific Ocean and what's happening for similar years as this one compared to his knowledge, and he came up with the analog years of 1963, 68, and 2018. They were a little bit different earlier in the winter, but he changes and updates them as El Nino temperatures warms and cools as well too. So we'll kind of use these a little bit for the talks to give you similar years. And I'll explain what they're based on. So here it is right here. Is a Southern Oscillation Index. It's a barometric pressure, so it's a measure of the atmosphere in the South Pacific between Darwin and Tahiti. So it's more a measure of the atmosphere. And you can see how it's tracking pretty close up here with these other analog years that he's selected. This Niño index is a sea surface temperature. So here's a La Niña fading into El Niña for these 3 years as well too. So it's a measure of the ocean temperatures basically. And then this was a PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, that cold spot off the coast of Alaska that we saw. So it had been colder than normal, now it's reaching back to neutral conditions. This one used to flip-flop, or I mean, it used to be more stable for 20 or 30 years, but now it's flip-flopping more often. So for some reason. So that's how he comes up with his analog years to look at, those three, rather than looking at the past 50 years or whatever. That'll show you why we use analog years, just the similar years. So here's a snowpack for 2 of his analog years. Was 2018, the snowpack was better in Montana and along the Idaho-Montana border, and then fading less to 60% of average in parts of Nevada and even less in the desert Southwest. Was 2018. And 63 is based on some of the snow course data and measurements, kind of a similar pattern as well too for Montana and Idaho. And if we look at this year, here's this year's snowpack for the 19th of March with well below normal area, well below normal, and a little bit better towards Montana, similar to what we saw in 63 as well too. So that's why I picked out that year as well, but there's limited data because that was the year I was born. So, but let's go. You can't talk about this year's snowpack without talking about the water year-to-date precipitation, because that's what's really near normal. Greens is normal, blues above average, and yellow is below normal. So that's really what we're seeing is a near normal water year-to-date precipitation since October 1. But the snowpack is what you see is what you get when you look out the window here. There's not much left even at Bogus Basin here. So it's all in the higher elevations. So we kind of have to talk about both these together for this year. And here's just zooming into Idaho for the water year-to-date precipitation through March 19th, where we are fading away to only 80% down here and 111% in north central Idaho. We'll come back to here in a second. And here's a snowpack, 6% of snowpack in Oahe. That's left. The Bruno's 27, 31 in Salmon Falls. And here's a little loss and big loss pushing 102, near normal because of those higher mounds there. So that's really what we need to solve this drought is taller mounds. So, and the Salmon Basin, they were 87, they're still at 86, 82. So they got this band of moisture since this is just March 1 through 21st of precipitation where the precip was above average north of Riggins, basically. And so they got better moisture there. But this was going back to the first slide because I told you the weather is what you see is what you get until the weather pattern changes. And I just haven't seen that it's going to change yet before April 1st. So there's potential for some storms coming in around April 1st or so, but we'll see if it cools off or not. So we'll talk about the future weather, and I gave a talk like 10 days ago. Man, things changed since then. A lot. Yes?
You work with Idaho utilities to help them predict hydropower generation?
I used to, yeah, work with the power companies, Idaho Power. They would use our data quite a bit for making their own decisions on how much water to store or not and when to release it. So other agencies, IDWR and NRCS, they still share the data quite a bit. Yep. Okay, so here is now where it comes in part. How did we get here? And here's the first part of it, the 3D drought is what I'm calling it. Back in January is a temperature drought because our temperatures are so warm that it caused this moisture to fall as rain rather than snow. But now it moved up to a 3D drought with a precipitation. This is just one side, Banner Summit up towards Lowman and Highway 21. And it shows the water year-to-date precipitation in black. And the green line is median for the 30-year average. And these are some of the other low years here as well too. I don't think I put 2018. But last year we're just a little bit better than this year. But it was colder, so the snow was there unlike this year. So we've had lower years than this. That's the precip. Actually, I had to see if we had any precip the past week or so, because I'll show you why in a second. Well, actually, on this graph. Here's one busy graph, but it's soil moisture. I think this goes back to 2008 when we started installing soil moisture sensors at 2, 8, and 20 inches deep. So this is a dry scale here, and it's a degree of saturation. And so coming from last summer, we left off here is the blue line, and this is where we picked up for this water year. Those October rains really filled the void after a very dry summer. So I kind of get excited, little things like that. And then we got more rains, October, November, and this year kept going up, 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 and up. And then December 18th came, and more of that moisture fell as rain, so it actually percolated down in the soil, so it increased again. And then it kind of leveled off, and the February 14th storm fell as snow, so we didn't see an increase. And here's 25, it kind of gradually increases in the wintertime. So it's kind of record high since 2008. And the reason I had to go back to see if any precip fell, which it's been dry, is because the soil moisture started increasing again. So that means the snow is melting a little bit, even up at Banner Summit, which is early. And so the same thing happened last year, right around April 1st, was the snow reached isothermal, starts melting, and then it increased a little bit more. And then once the snow melted out on mid-May here, it didn't rain at all. So it was a nice smooth curve until this rain event happened end of June or early July. And you can see another one happening here. So it's kind of neat to watch what's really happening in terms of soil moisture because you relate back to the weather. So that's good news. I don't know, is that good news? The soil moisture is saturated? Or should that moisture still be in the snowpack waiting to come off? So it's a unique year. I guess I'll talk about it. Okay, and here's the Banner Summit snow water equivalent on this scale here. So the snow water is just the amount of water in the snowpack. If you were to melt it down, that's how much standing water is there waiting to melt versus the snow depth. So normally it peaks at what, 25 inches, 27 inches, and we're starting to reaching the peak about 19 inches. And it started coming down the past couple days already, which is early. Usually we don't melt out till later on. But there's a couple other years. Here's 2001 was a record low, and it got pushed out a little bit. 2015 is a similar year, but it actually started coming down earlier. And what we don't want to do is keep losing this coming off this early. That would not be very good. We'd lose the moisture then, and we know how dry our summers are as well too. So, and here's 2025 last year, where we were when we peaked. But the moisture was very similar to 2025 as well too. But all that fell as snow up at Banner Summit, basically. Here's a couple of dry Januaries for this year and last year. So that's what really hurt us. We weren't too bad around early January, but then the dryness we had for like 40 days is we just didn't add it while the averages keep increasing. So here's a kind of busy graph, but it really shows the percent of average snowpack by elevation. So here's the Boise Basin. This is on January 1. So 0% of normal on January 1. There were a few sites like that. So here's 6,000 feet. And there's probably Bogus Basin and Moores Creek right in here, where they hardly had a snowpack on January 1. And overall, the basin was 57% of average because of the high sites up at 8,000 feet. Vienna Mine and a few other sites, Trinity Mountain, had a near normal snowpack or even better. The Pad Basin, overall, they were 50% of normal. And then dropping down to Wahi, a low elevation, was only 15% of average on January 1st. So I had to kind of shift the graphs to get them all lined up at 50% and 100% of normal. But it just shows those taller mountains is what really received the moisture this winter. Then jumping to March 1, here's a similar graph where the Big Lost Basin is now 118% of average, with the lowest sites at 70%, while the Boise Basin overall at 60% of average. And here's Bogus Basin again, probably right in this area, 30, 40% of average. And the Wahi down to 17% of normal. It didn't even make it above, one site wasn't even above 50%. So it's just a bigger elevation gradient than we've seen in the past. Here's one I borrowed from Henry's Fork Foundation. Rob Van Kirk does a really good job of sharing information with the irrigators, the farmers, the fishermen, the hydropower companies. So they're kind of all seeing the watershed as a whole and what's going to happen there. So he's been tracking the data using the Snowtail data. Goes back, I think, well, this average is from 1989 to 25 is the red line's average. The green line is last year's temperature for the watershed as a whole. And here's this year of how warm it's been compared to last year and normal. So even last year, the green was above average the whole time as well too, but this year is even higher. Here's the big picture of the drought monitor, showing where Idaho is. One spot of red is more extreme drought D3 conditions. And even the east, even though they got a lot of storms back there, they still have some signs of dryness as well too. So it's a good map, but there's a lot that goes into it between short-term droughts, long-term, and a lot of information.
The drought, is it based upon soil moisture, or how's that determined?
Well, when I was working, I determined it myself, basically. Because these guys started it like in the mid-2000s, and they needed people in every state to provide information. So I was the only one that provided information for Idaho. So I kind of tell them, they'd have their ideas on how to color Idaho and everything. And I said, no, our snow is really good, but it's not going to melt. It's been dry. The rivers are normally low this year. So over the years and decades, they've reached out to more and more local people, getting more input. So they look at soil moisture conditions, precipitation, snowfall, the runoff for the past few months as well too.
So it's a variety of measures that are covered.
It is, and they're trying to get as much local information as they can as well too. So David Hokema from IDWR runs it now, and you can share information with him as well too. So it's a pretty good product based on a lot of different input from everybody. Okay, let's go boating now and try to figure this one out. So I gave you all the information of where we are now, how we got here. And this is actually, I think, from 2003, I took the picture. But you got to have your boats ready if you're going to float some of these rivers this year. They're still going to peak. It's going to be a shorter peak, and the duration's not going to be as long as some of the years. So here's a current snapshot of where we are. Let's see how we're doing. Okay. on time. And it's a USGS stream flow for all the gauging stations across the country. Green is near normal, even the below normal, the drought that we just saw in the Florida area and the East Coast as well too, is a low stream flow. While the blues are much above average and black is all-time record high. So we got blues and blacks in Washington and Idaho because of that atmospheric river that just came through here. But you also have to think we're record high because normally the rivers are pretty low this still. So we're adding water to the rivers right now when normally we don't till later on in April, May, and June. So we're coming up, and it is kind of surprising to see they are record high. But not in Washington because they've been getting feet of snow and maybe a foot of rain as well too. Yes?
Since the rivers are higher now, how's that going to play in some?
No. So that's a good question. So we're going to lose more of the water now and have less later, unless those April 1 storms come in and we cool off and keep the snow higher longer. Otherwise, we can't have it now and later. But the trend this year is warmer than normal temperatures.
But aren't the reservoirs fuller right now than they typically are this time of year?
Yes. Right. Yeah. You guys are getting ahead of me. I better keep going. No, it's good. I'm glad you're thinking because that was now we're going to try to figure all this out, and that's it. So, okay, let's keep moving. So here's the water supply forecast from the Weather Service because they do daily updates on their models. And this is the volume of runoff for April through September period. Green is near normal, red's 25 to 50%, which is down here. And what's Oahe? 23% of normal. Boise, or it could be 75 or 72. Here's the big loss, 127. And up in the Clearwater Basin as well too, over here. So these, they're updated every day, so they change a little bit, while the NRCS is putting out monthly forecasts and some daily ones as well too. But let's start in the upper Snake above high C, which is over by Idaho Falls basically, and the snowpack's overall 87% of normal. And here's this black line, normal is the green, 25 is up here last year. And Rob Van Kurt, he's using this 2015. There's 2015, here, right here on top of it. Here's 92, I think, this low year. So kind of a similar year for right now. It was a warm year as well too. 1934 was really warm. They're comparing a lot too, but we don't have much SNOTEL data going back to 1934. So there's been other low years. And here's a current reservoir system for the upper Snake. Overall, they're 68% full. The Palisades is only 48%. And so I reread my Friday email this morning and late last night, and Rob Van Kirk, he's a really good guy. I didn't know he writes in run-on sentences. So I had to break his sentence up here. And what he's saying is it's safe to say right now the Upper Snake Reservoir System will not fill. Junior storage right holders such as a Fremont Madison up in the Henry's Fork will not receive full allocations. Natural flow water right priorities will drop several weeks to a month ahead of average. Reservoir draft will also start very early. Aquatic, if you're a fisher, insects will hatch 3 to 5 weeks earlier than normal, and a period of poor water quality in the downstream area Island Park Reservoir will start earlier as like mid-June, as early as mid-June. System-wide reservoir draft will be high again this year for watering the crops, resulting in very low carryover for next year. So his one long paragraph really summarized what I was trying to find. So, okay, this was going to be the good news, was a big loss. But then I plotted the snow water equivalent up, the black line for this year, and it was above average, which is the green line, but it started coming down already as well too. So some of the lower sites in the basin are melting. And here's the other years, 2021, I think was the red line, and 2015. And that's what we want to do, is trying to push this out later than coming straight down like here. So the Payette Basin, overall the Snowpack on about a dozen or so sites. I forget how many are in here. Here's 2026. Last year was way up here with a really good snowpack that we had. 2015 and 2001 was a drought year. And here's the runoff for these years as well too. So 2001, the runoff for the April through July was only 37% of normal. But right now they're still predicting 65% of average for April through July. In 87, 44, 47 in these 2 years, and last year was 100%, even with this really good snowpack because it didn't rain. So this is a challenge for the reservoir operators. This is from the Weather Service, and it just shows kind of this daily forecast going down since January 1 or so, basically. I had to double check my numbers, so because I did this talk a little bit ago, and they weren't this low. They were better than they are now. So that's what they're looking at in the Payette, and I think so Horseshoe Bend, January 8th, it was green grass was showing below the snow line because of the rain and warm temperatures. But here's your question about the rains that we had December 8th. Yes, the rivers all came up, and this is a reservoir storage, so all that water was caught in the reservoirs basically. This is a Cascade and Deadwood, and normally this is where we are. And for 30 years, we're always kind of tracking here. It's kind of boring to watch, but this year something's finally happening. And so the snow's not being stored in mounds and it's running down. So good or bad, it's going to make it challenging for the reservoir operators. And talking to Ryan Hendrick, on March 7th, he said the Payette system will fill, but it's either going to fill from low to middle elevation runoff, and if there's no more runoff to come, or not enough, then they'll use a high elevation snow to fill it. And there'll be less natural flow flowing down through Horseshoe Bend and everything if the mid snow doesn't show up. So it's a balancing game as well too. So they're confident with filling that one. Then we move to the Boise Basin, and here's the snowpack, 65% of median where we are today. Here's average and last year. And here's the December 18th rain event. And the 14th, dry January. The forecast, 47% of normal for April through July. But for these other years, 2018 was up here, was 92%. Last year was 91. And 47 kind of fits in these areas of 01 and 87, this lower, as long as the snow comes off later and not earlier. So, but quite the difference from a year ago when we were up here. And here's even a steeper drop in the daily water supply forecast as well too, coming down from January 1 to current. And the band of the air, those 5 exceedance forecasts that I talked about, you could see the band's a lot bigger early in the season when we don't know as much and more can change. But as you move through the season, you learn more, so that band is actually getting tighter and tighter as well too. So the New York Canal's ready, waiting for the water. They've been paving it the past few years and everything, trying to do a mile a year. And last year, if they weren't ready to have it ready to flow with the water, they were going to be fined $1 million a day when it couldn't open. So this year, it was only being, I heard $250,000 a day, but they got it done a couple weeks ago, basically. And they're still doing some work over in Barber Park, that area. And there's been no flood control releases, so they didn't need to put water in the canal yet, but it's ready when it is. It's been kind of an interesting project as a hydrologist that lives on the banks above the canal watching them at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning too. So, but here's the rain event again, December 18th. So the storage is kind of tracking near normal basically. And then all the rivers came up, they popped up basically, and they were still trending above normal. And the challenge here, 10 days ago, Arrow Rock was a lot less, maybe 70% full. Now I think we're up to 90%. I'm sorry, Anderson. Which one's Anderson? Here's Anderson, 71%. So okay, it's still there, but all these rivers basically fed into Lucky Peak and Arrow Rock, but not Anderson because it's a higher one. So it had less of this water coming into it. So the challenge was filling the reservoirs, but not too early, depending on what the future weather holds. And I haven't heard any updates for the Boise River. Has anybody else? The status, or they had talked about releasing water a couple of weeks ago for flood control, but that's kind of faded away. And so, but they don't want to fill them too early. What if it does rain in May or even early June as well too? So that's where the challenge comes in. And the more data, the better, usually. And here's one surface water supply index that we came up in the 90s when I was working. And it's a combination of reservoir storage for the Boise, the 3 reservoirs, total storage for the current month of March 1, and then the observed runoff from April through September in the lighter blue on top. And here's the threshold, 1.5 million acre feet, when shortages typically start occurring for irrigation for farmers. And then here's those 5 exceedance forecasts stacked above the reservoir storage for this year. And you can see the 70% exceedance was right at the threshold. But with this dry March, and what I showed you the future weather for the rest of March, what I've seen is these forecasts typically are all going to drop down a level come April 1st when they update this project again. So this threshold is going to be up here where the 50% threshold is, I bet you. That's just what's going to happen with the dryness we saw in March. Here's 2017 was a good year. 97, 98, 99 as well too. A lot of people put a lot of information on here, whether or not you're going to get a full water supply. You can determine mint needs good long water supply all the way through August to get the oils to ferment and come out. Some other farmers in the Salmon Falls district south of Twin Falls, if they're going to be water short, they may only get a chance to plant beans and some other grasses rather than corn, because they're not going to have a full water supply either. So that's kind of how you can use this threshold. A powerboat salesman back in the 90s saw he was buying too many boats in the dry years. So he started planning his financial income of powerboat sales with the Snowpack, and there's a tight correlation between snow and river flow and powerboat sales. So you learn how to buy in the future based on the Snowpack as well too. So it all depends what you're into or how you're using this information. Even a restaurant owner in Ketchum, she did the same thing. Skiers are happy they're spending more money when it snows, and she's making more income as well too, all because of snow. So that's what it comes down to here in the West. And this is why we use analog years. I can't keep all these years straight anymore. And so this is Bogus Basin on February 16th and where the snow water content was. Here about 4 inches of water in the snowpack. And we should have been normal in here about 10 inches or so. Here's that 2015 year as well too. And this only goes back to 2000 is when we installed that site with them. So here's currently where we are. So there was a little bit of storms back in February 14th to really help them out, and this week as well too. So it pushed it higher than 2015. And if we can push that out a little bit more, would be better as well too. And then last week's storm brought 15 inches of snow in 12 hours. And that's the increase. So we're kind of above the 2015 levels now.
It was good to ski on.
It was. I was there too.
The only time I saw it hit 40-inch base.
40 inch?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, okay, I'm just testing you. You're right. So I didn't think you'd believe me. Until 15 inches of snow in 12 hours. It snowed overnight. And it could have been a record. The snow depth data only goes back to, I think, 2008. No, a little before 2002. And so it's an ultrasonic depth sensor mounted above the site, and it sends a picture out just like your camera lens. So the distance the beam travels reflects off the snow surface, and it measures the time for that beam to come back. And then we can inversely calculate the snow depth. And so those came out in the early 2000s. But you're right, before the March 4th, it was 23 inches of depth. And then 17 or 12 hours later, it got to 40 inches. That was probably the peak for the season as well too, while last year was 100 inches. Here's the water content increasing from 8.5 to 10.6, so 2 inches of water. And the precip went from 17.2 to 18.3, so only 1.3 inches. Sometimes that happens at Bogus. It's a kind of a windy site, but it accumulates the same every year up there as well too. So here's my backyard during that time. And Bogus, they swept the board 4 o'clock, so you had to add the numbers together for the total snowfall. But the snow tell actually showed it here as well too. And then temperatures are good too. They got dropped down to 24 degrees, which was ideal for skiers. So here's one more, just showing where we were last year. This is April 1st. No, January. This is January 1st. For this year, 8 inches. And last year we had 58 inches. And there's only a handful of years had more than 58 on January 1st, going back to 1944. But only 8 times has Bogus exceeded 100 inches since 1942. So it's one of the extremes again too. So we're just seeing a lot of extreme years like this. And here's even a better reason to use those analog years. So Morris Creek snow pillow goes back to 1982. And that was this record high year as well too. And here's where we are this year, 26, 13, 87, 92, all those similar drought years. And here, you kind of remember when people correct you and everything. So I gave one talk, and I talked about the moisture coming in back in the February of 86. Camas Creek more than doubled their snowpack and everything. I said, yeah, we need more storms like this. But the chief of the Weather Service said, no, Ron, that was a Pineapple Express that came in. And so that's what happened this year, February of 86, was went from here to here in less than 30 days, because February only has 28 days. And so since then, that's when they started calling it atmospheric rivers as well too, because they don't always originate from Hawaii with that band of moisture. They can be north or south as well too. So that's why they call them atmospheric rivers. And it was 2017, I just remembered. So that year, the West Coast had 50 atmospheric rivers hitting the West Coast. So it was a huge year, and that brought all that snow in 2017.
Well, it was 86 the year they almost overtopped to Glen Canyon.
83 and 84.
83, 84, yeah.
Yep, one of the El Nino years. And this is January, right? So maybe next year, hopefully, and the year after.
So do the reservoir managers use, if we're predicting to have El Niños the next couple of years, and those are typically good snow years in Idaho, but not always, do they use that information as far as how much they'll leave in the reservoirs this year? If they're assuming next year could be a bumper crop of snow, and they
would use it all up this year? Typically not, because your water right is for this year and not next year. So the water rights they're trying to meet are for the current year based on the runoff and what's in the reservoirs and the rivers. So they're going to use that water this year. And they could store some, and if the rivers are high enough, then they wouldn't have to use as much reservoir, and they would know that. But typically they can't plan ahead betting on next year, like I can talk about it. Except in the Bear River and Bear Lake. Down there, they came up with a Bear River allocation, allotment between Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. And based on a storage in Bear Lake, they're only allowed to take so much for this year. And if it doesn't come up next year, then they're still only allowed to take so much. They don't want Bear Lake to get too low, so they kind of limit the amount they use each year is kind of what you're asking. But right now, they only do that on Bear Lake and not other reservoirs. So, and here's the Wahi, the snowpack for this year, the black line where we were tracking, and it was so warm. And you got to remember, a Wahi basin is bigger than the Weiser, Payette, and Boise basin combined. So it's huge, but it's a low elevation as well too. They don't have very tall mountains, and so that they're really more affected by the temperatures. Here's a good red year. I don't know what year that was. There's too many red lines there, but it actually increased some in March. And so some of the other years from the Wahi River, here's kind of shifting a little bit. Here's stream flow for some other low years. Remember talking 1977 was always the drought of all times, and Bogus Basin had A season and the B season because they opened and closed back in 77. And the runoff I had a plot up here for the Wahi River was near zero. What did I say? Not 25% of normal. And then 63 I plotted up because here's this year where we currently are, the black line here going behind this box. And here's 63 and 77. Only it's 224 CFS. Record low is 196. So I applied 63 up because that's one of the years from Pete Parson, and it hardly had any runoff as well too, except they had a major rain event after June 1st where it shot to 5,000 CFS. So that could still happen as well too. So that's why I'm a little hopeful for April, May, but once you get beyond June, we just don't have those storms coming in that could make something like this happen. Typically, you need 1,500 or 1,000 CFS to float the Wahi River, and when it's above 15,000, it's too high. 15,000 or 5,000 too. So, okay, now we're moving upstream to the Selway River. But if you're on the lower Hells Canyon, they actually have jet boat races down there, and these guys are doing 100 miles an hour on the river. So here's the Selway River. Got to include this one because I just had to see how much snow they actually got from last week's atmospheric river event that came through there. So they went from 15 inches of water up to 20 basically. And now with the warm temperatures, it's starting coming down already. So even up there too. So here's the other low years with 77 in green and 87 and then 01 in red. While normal is here. And this is probably 74 year way up here. Yeah, but we didn't have daily data back in 74 at that site. But so here's the Selway River where we currently are with this current peak coming up, and then it cooled off and it warmed back up. And the other years as well too, they got to 15,000, and then that's actually above 15,000 is not considered more dangerous for floating the Selway River. But some people got early permits. The permit season starts May 15th. They want to know what the flow is going to be if they can still get to the site to put in as well too. And then you can see all these years, if this is median, all these other low snow years, the river dropped below average in early June and stayed there the rest of the summer. So that's what happens in years like this as well too, without the moisture to feed it. The forecast is 83% of average. And other years actually more close to the 60%. 80, 81, 2024. And here's a couple of projections from the Weather Service of Selway River. So we'll start on the bottom here, and this is from March 11th when it was projected to start increasing, and they nailed it. So that's what happened as well too. The increase happened, it cooled down, and so now here's where we are here. And then with yesterday's cold front, they're showing it coming down. And then there's another cold, windy front coming in on Wednesday. So they're showing another projection to come down. But even if you go back to this early one, they kind of nailed it. So they did a good job predicting 10 days out. And I thought I had one for here's the Middle Fork as well too. Then we'll go back. So the Middle Fork on the 11th showed the increase. And that increase happened right here as well too. And showing a peak happening and then coming down in a secondary peak based on the weather through April 1st, but not beyond. And but here's we also did some snow to flow correlations to determine peak flows for reservoir operators, but also for river runners. And when the Banner Summit gets to be 90% melted, nearly all melted, when it has 21 inches of water or less, which is where we are this year, then that's when the peak occurs for the Middle Fork. And so if we're right here at the peak, about 19 inches, and it started coming down like I showed you, if we continue a downward trend, it would be very early peak for the Middle Fork as well too. So that's why we're hoping we want to push this out later, which means it's going to be cool and wet as well too. We just don't want that peak to happen this early. So I updated some. It's always nice to show to verify your forecast when you're using this. So the past couple of years, 2 of the years, this relationship nailed it, and the other one was within 4 days of the actual peak happening as well too. So it's another tool for river runners. Okay, but that's where I was going, was at future weather. So here's yesterday's front that came through, got windy and then cooled off as well too here. And then kind of steady temperatures. And then another front comes through on Wednesday. So that's why you see those double hump in the stream flow based on future weather they're plugging in there. This is from the Missoula forecast, but it's a good explanation what's going to happen this week. 5-day total precipitation, not much, except for Washington again. And that's up to 3 to 4 inches, while Idaho, shades of blue, is almost an inch up here, and high and dry down here. Here's the one PNA index to watch, and when it goes negative means we're going to have some weather, and so it had been negative, but right around April 1st it goes back to near zero, which means weather is not as common or a chance of occurring in the Pacific Northwest. And that's what happened here back in January, was a dry January that we had as well too. So it kind of gives you a 2-week indicator to figure out your ski days, is how I use that. And future weather as well too. I couldn't find much, so that's why I put this last rather than first. So the short 6 to 10 day outlook is above normal temperatures in the west, a little cooler in the northeast. Precipitation is below normal here, and a little bit of moisture in the Midwest. 8 to 10 days out, going out to April 4th, kind of favors the same. Warm temperatures, some moisture is possible. And even 3 to 4 weeks out, going to the April 4th to 17th, still favoring above normal conditions, because that's what we're seeing, but equal chances is a wide area, while below here and wetter to the east into mid-April. Oh, and this was just one I've used this Excel spreadsheet that I mentioned. It was written by Tom Pagano when he worked for the NRCS in our office. And he'd go home and have dinner at his dinner table. I guess he was bored in Portland and asked me about the spreadsheet. And then he'd work on the spreadsheet at his dinner table. And then the next day he'd email it around, is this what you wanted? I said, no, but if you could do this, because talking to Bill Andrekin when I first started here, all Bill wanted was, all we need, Ron, is a similar year. Because once you see similar years, you can match them up, and the flow is pretty consistent as well too, as you're receding down. So Tom Pagano would work this spreadsheet up, and there's been some other minor tweaks by Jeff Anderson, worked in our office as well too, to produce these graphs. And then you could do projections based on current flow, peak to date, total volume, or the closest pattern to this year as well too. So you can come up with these random years. 1915 was a year just like this, and it worked just like that. And the spreadsheet worked for 20 years. But then September 2nd, 2025, last year, it stopped working. So the USGS changed their data platform, so it doesn't grab all the current data anymore. So I'm trying to get it updated for some folks as well too. If they could do it, they could share with others as well too. It's just been an amazing spreadsheet. I stumped my old boss. I gave it to him one night. He came back around. He stumped. He was our state engineer. He couldn't figure it out either, whatever Tom did. So it was really cool, the macros that he did. Now, so I'm kind of feeling like a salmon making its last stretch going upriver, up the Marsh Creek. And I'm not sure. This was used to educate a lot of people about future peak flows and what the flow is going to be on your river trip. But we just don't have this nice, easy tool like we used to. So there's a lot of information there. But if there are any more questions or corrections or comments?
Does climate seeding do anything?
Yes, but you need clouds to seed. So, right. And warmer, cooler weather as well too. I think ideal temperature is 23 degrees, like 8,000, 10,000 feet. And so when the storms are there, they're sending their airplanes out, releasing the silver iodine to seed the clouds. And it may be planes are here, but they're seeding 20 or 30 miles away. So they have it down to a science where they want that moisture to fall, basically. I think Idaho Power said they've increased it from 7 to 14%, like an average of 10 or 12% of water content 10% since for 20 years basically. They started in the Payette Basin, and now there's more basins doing in the Big Lost, excuse me, Big Wood, the Boise was, the Upper Snake as well too. So yeah, there's been they used to measure the snow back in 2017, where they actually did some of the research. They measured the layers of snow, which one had silver iodine and which ones didn't. And they could see it falling in those layers, and they had radar set up there too. So within 5 to 10 minutes after seeding over here, they could see the snow start falling. But then 2017 was so big, they had to stop seeding because there's too much snow in the mountains, everything. They didn't need to seed anymore, but they learned a lot that year. So, yes? No, it's a cooperative program funding by Idaho Water Resources Board. Kind of helps coordinate with irrigation districts across those basins in southern Idaho, and Idaho Power as well too. So Idaho Power started seeding originally in the Payette Basin, but it's expanded to the irrigators that are paying for it along with Idaho Power. Yes?
Question about sensors, weather sensors and weather reporting that you're talking about, different owners, it's like Idaho Power.
Oh, of all the weather data that's collected?
Is there any money, do you see any money in the budget to increase the number of weather sites they put out there, the automated weather sites?
We used to try to get some funding from Idaho Department of Water Resources, especially after the 97, 98, 99 floods. They needed more low elevation sites because that's where a lot of flooding happened. So we installed about 4 of those sites, Bogus Basin being one of them. And so they're kind of go through different phases like that when money becomes available, and we installed more. After that, it became more of a personnel challenge with how many more sites can we maintain without additional workforce to maintain them as well too. So it's a challenge to keep the current sites up and running while you're trying to expand as well too. Other private entities like Idaho Power has some of their weather stations they use for cloud seeding and monitoring what's happening as well too, and stream gauging stations. So there are some private ones out there. Some of that information is available, but not all of it. So it all kind of depends on which basin you're in and who's most interested in that snow or stream flow data. Even BPA, Bonneville Power Administration as well too, with the salmon. Corps of Engineers in their watersheds. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, but it also comes down to resources.
Sounds like we're paid back to speed to put more out there.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just doing these snow to flow relationships that I've done to help users use the information that we have. We have almost 50 years of daily data now. And in Montana, some of those sites go back to the mid-60s. So I look at that up in the Selway River too. So there's a lot of information out there. It just takes time.
What's your prediction on how good of a irrigation year this is going to be then? Are they going to start it on time or delay it and cut it off early?
For the Boise Basin,
Yeah.
You know, I haven't really heard that much about it. I kind of don't watch it as closely, but I do pick up and hear information. And earlier they thought the New York Canal would start around mid-month, and it's the 20th or 22nd already, so it hasn't. They're not releasing water. They're trying to store as much as they can. Yeah.
February.
We sort of fulfill our commitment. If Ron could stay around for a little bit to answer some individual questions. But let's give him a good hand now for a win.
Thanks.